There is a silent contract that every good child signs in their heart long before they understand the cruelty of the world. We believe that love is a meritocracy, and we believe that if we show up, if we care, if we sacrifice our own lives, to ease the twilight years of our parents, we will be recognized. We do not do it for the money, or at least we tell ourselves we do it, but deep down, we believe in justice. We believe that the one who holds the hand at the deathbed should be the one who holds the keys to the house. But there is a dark irony in the dynamics of family inheritance that is rarely spoken about at the dinner table, which is that the prodigal son is not just forgiven, he is rewarded, while the faithful son is often forgotten. The parent does not leave the inheritance to the child who loves them the most, they leave it to the child they fear losing the most. This is the story of Samuel, who spent 10 years keeping his father's world from falling apart, only to watch his brother Lucas walk in at the last moment and steal the ruins. Samuel was the quiet one. He was the steady one. He was the one who lived 20 minutes away from his parents' old Victorian house, while Lucas lived across the country chasing dreams that never seemed to materialize. When their mother died, Samuel was the one who handled the funeral arrangements. He was the one who sat with his father Henry, night after night, listening to the same stories of the war and the same regrets about the past. Samuel had a wife and he had a job, but his life became secondary to the needs of his father. Lucas was different. Lucas was charming. Lucas was like a firework, bright and loud and fleeting. He would call once a month, and his voice would fill the room with excitement about a new business venture or a new girlfriend. Henry's face would light up when Lucas called in a way it never lit up for Samuel. Samuel was part of the furniture. He was the infrastructure of Henry's life. He paid the utility bills, he fixed the leaking roof, he organized the medication. He was necessary, but he was boring. Lucas was an event. Lucas was a rarity. And because he was rare, his attention felt like a prize. The decline of Henry's health was slow and painful. It was a long descent into dementia and frailty. For 3 years, Samuel became a nurse. He learned how to change adult diapers. He learned how to bathe a man who was fighting him. He learned how to swallow his own exhaustion when his father screamed at him in confusion, calling him by the wrong name. Often that name was Lucas. "Where is Lucas?" the old man would ask, his eyes searching the room. "Why doesn't he come?" Samuel would hold his father's hand and say, "He is busy, Dad, he is working." Samuel protected his father from the truth that Lucas simply didn't care enough to visit. During those 3 years, Lucas visited twice. He stayed for 2 hours each time. He sat by the bed and told jokes and made the old man laugh. He didn't see the bed sores. He didn't smell the sickness. He didn't have to deal with the doctors or the insurance companies. He came in like a tourist in someone else's tragedy, took a few photos of himself being a good son, and then left before the hard work began. And yet, after every visit, Henry would talk about Lucas for weeks. He would say, "Lucas is such a good boy. He is going through a hard time. We need to help him." Samuel would bite his tongue. He wanted to scream. He wanted to say, "I am here wiping your brow," while he is out there living his life. But he said nothing, because duty is a heavy coat that muffles the voice. The end came on a freezing Tuesday in January. Samuel was there holding his father's hand as the last breath rattled out of his chest. Lucas was on a plane flying in too late because he had missed the earlier flight due to a hangover. When Lucas arrived, the body was already gone. He cried loudly in the hallway. He performed his grief with the dramatic flair of an actor. He hugged Samuel and said, "We are orphans now, brother. We only have each other." Samuel felt nothing. He was just tired. He was hollowed out by the long watch. He thought that now at least the burden was lifted. He thought that now there would be fairness. He assumed that the house, the savings, and the small portfolio of stocks would be divided equally, or perhaps weighted slightly in his favor to compensate for the years of care. He didn't want the money for luxury. He wanted it to pay off the debts he had incurred taking care of Henry. The reading of the will took place 2 weeks later in the dusty office of the family lawyer. The lawyer was an old man who refused to make eye contact with Samuel. He opened the envelope and cleared his throat. The words were simple, but they hit Samuel with the force of a physical blow. To my son Samuel, I leave my collection of vintage books and my watch as a token of my appreciation for his loyalty. To my son Lucas, I leave the family home the residue of the savings accounts and the remainder of the estate to help him find his footing in life. The silence in the room was absolute. Samuel looked at the lawyer waiting for the punchline. He waited for the correction. But there was no correction. The logic was twisted but clear. In Henry's mind, Samuel was strong. Samuel had a job. Samuel had shown he could survive. Lucas was the broken bird. Lucas was the one who needed saving. The inheritance was not a reward for past service. It was a life raft for future failure. Henry had punished Samuel for his competence and rewarded Lucas for his incompetence. Lucas tried to hide his smile, but his eyes were dancing. He leaned over and touched Samuel's shoulder. "Dad always knew I needed a little extra help," he said. "You are the successful one, Sammy. You don't need this stuff." Samuel stood up. He left the books. He left the watch. He walked out of the office and into the parking lot. He felt a rage so pure and so hot that he thought he might burst into flames. It wasn't about the money. It was about the erasure. The will was a final statement from his father that said your sacrifice meant nothing to me. Your love was expected, and therefore it had no value. Lucas's love was scarce, and therefore it was priceless. Samuel realized that he had been buying a ticket to a show that had already been sold out. In the months that followed, Samuel watched from a distance as Lucas dismantled their father's life. Lucas moved into the house, but he didn't maintain it. He threw loud parties. He sold the antique furniture that their mother had loved. He burned through the savings on new cars and bad investments. The house that Samuel had spent his weekends repairing began to peel and rot. The garden that Samuel had watered turned to weeds. Neighbors called Samuel to complain about the noise and the trash. Samuel had to tell them, "It is not my house anymore. It is not my responsibility." This was the hardest part, letting go of the responsibility. For so long his identity had been the caretaker. Now he had to learn to be the observer of the destruction. He cut ties with Lucas. It was a quiet severance. He simply stopped answering the phone. When Lucas called to ask for help with the property taxes or to ask how to fix the boiler, Samuel let it ring. He realized that if he helped Lucas now, he would be disrespecting himself. He would be continuing the dynamic that had enslaved him for years. He had to let Lucas fail. He had to let the house fall if necessary. 1 year later, Samuel ran into a nurse who had cared for his father in the final weeks. She stopped him in the supermarket. She said, "I was surprised to hear about the will. Your father spoke about you all the time when he was lucid." Samuel laughed a bitter, dry laugh. "He spoke about Lucas," he said. "No," the nurse said. "He spoke about Lucas to you. But he spoke about you to himself. He knew who was washing him. He knew who was feeding him. He told me once that he was leaving the money to Lucas because he knew Lucas would be dead in a gutter without it. He said Samuel is a man. Lucas is a child. He didn't give Lucas the money because he loved him more. He gave it to him because he respected him less." Samuel stood in the aisle, holding a carton of milk, and felt a shift in his chest. It didn't fix the injustice. The money was still gone. The house was still ruined, but the perspective changed. He realized that the inheritance was not a prize. It was an allowance for a dependent. His father had looked at his 2 sons and saw one who could stand on his own 2 feet and one who needed crutches. He had given the crutches to the cripple. It was unfair, yes, but it was also a confession of the father's failure to raise Lucas into a man. Samuel walked out of the store and looked at the sky. He drove to his own small house. It was modest. It had a mortgage, but it was his. Every brick was paid for with his own labor. Every light bulb was changed by his own hand. He walked inside and kissed his wife. He looked at his life and realized that he possessed something Lucas never would. He possessed dignity. He possessed the knowledge that he could survive the winter without a handout. Lucas eventually lost the house. He leveraged it for a loan he couldn't repay, and the bank took it. He ended up moving to another city, blaming everyone, but himself blaming Samuel for not helping him. Lucas was rich for a year, but he was poor in spirit forever. Samuel was poor for a moment, but he was rich in character forever. The lesson of the brother who took everything is a hard one to swallow. It teaches us that human justice is flawed. It teaches us that parents are just people with their own fears and their own guilt. They often try to fix their mistakes with money from the grave. They try to buy the love of the child who rejected them while taking for granted the child who accepted them. If you are the Samuel in your family, do not let this bitterness eat your soul. Do not look at the empty bank account and think it is a measure of your worth. The inheritance you received cannot be spent, and it cannot be stolen. Your inheritance is your strength. Your inheritance is your discipline. Your inheritance is the clear conscience of knowing that when the duty called you answered. Let the Lucases of the world have the money. They need it to mask the emptiness of their lives. They need the golden parachute because they do not know how to fly. You do not need it. You are the one who knows how to walk through the fire and not burn. You are the one who built the house. You can build another one. Do not envy the one who wins the lottery of guilt. Pity them, for they have received a gift they do not understand and a burden they cannot carry. You walked away with nothing in your hands, but you walked away with everything in your heart. And in the end, that is the only ledger that balances. The house is just wood and stone. The money is just paper. But who you became in those long dark nights by the bedside, that is eternal. You are free now. You have paid your debts. Walk forward into your own life and leave the ghosts to fight over the dust.